David, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk, mindset, leadership. It's so important, especially I find in, times like now, because there is a lot of uncertainty everywhere, especially in the construction industry, but really in all business, right? People don't know, banks are failing now as we speak, and lots of stuff happening, right? So all of that becomes extremely important for leaders within a business.
Yeah.
Before we get into all that, though, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your story. What was the catalyst? What brought you to this world of wanting to work with people and serve people the way you do?
Well, I started off by really finding out that I had made some terrible decisions in my life and that I was reaping the consequences of those decisions. One of the first ones was that I quit high school. I didn't have any college education. I really didn't have any skill sets, and I got married. I had a couple of kids, just not understanding anything about the responsibility of what I was taking on, and everything began to fall apart. Mostly from a financial perspective. It was the late '80s, and we were in a bad economy. I couldn't keep the job that I was in because they couldn't afford to keep me, so I ended up driving a forklift. We went bankrupt. We had our brand new car repossessed. We couldn't afford to live in our apartment. We had to literally leave in the middle of the night and sneak out across the state, find someplace else to live. And it was just getting worse and worse. And I could not figure out how to change it. I understood. I was like, okay, you made some really poor decisions here. Here's the consequences. You need to fix this. But I didn't know how. And for 2 years, I was stuck with it just getting worse, almost on the daily. And it was affecting my attitude. It was affecting my viewpoint. I was even asking people for help, like, what do I do? And they would tell me, work more overtime.
Right.
And I was not getting out of my own way. And one night, I was working 6.5 days a week, and I was basically working 2 jobs. I was making about $20,000 a year. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to pay the debt that we had, on top of having 2 babies in the house and all of that stuff. So I just had a meltdown at work one night. I came in, I got reprimanded twice before I even punched in.
Oh, wow.
One of those nights, right? Like, you
Yeah.
screwed this up, and then you screwed this up. And it was a brutally cold night in Chicago. Like I said, I was on a dock driving a forklift. Things were going wrong. Pallets were falling over. Nothing was going right. And I was in the back of this truck, and I had just brought a pallet into it. I worked for a food distributor at the time. The whole thing fell over, and I just broke down and started crying. And I thought to myself, there's got to be some way to get out of this. And I said, please, God, show me some way, something, whatever it is. I'll do whatever. I get it that I made a mistake, but show me how to get out. And this little voice in my head said, David, change your attitude. And I began to work on that immediately. From the perspective of, I really didn't know what it was. So I had to try to figure out what it was. And I decided that I was going to change 3 things. I was going to start acting like I loved what I did. I was going to start doing all of the jobs that I was supposed to do to the best of my ability, because I wasn't doing that. And I was going to treat people with total respect, which I had really soured on, because I kind of had this world is against me kind of an attitude. Anyway, in 30 days, my income tripled after I did that. And I sat there and was like, how could this possibly be? How could my income triple after 2 years of everything just being horrible in 30 days? There's something here that I need to learn, but I don't know what it is. I didn't really understand what I had done and how it affected my opportunity. So I began to study, and I was like, I've got to figure this out, because if I can figure this out, I can replicate this in my life and I can become successful. So that began a journey of 7 years of studying, going to seminars. I started with Tony Robbins' personal power tapes back in the late 80s. It was, or early 90s, whatever it was. I just built on it from there. And then by 1999, I was ready to start my own business, because what I was doing was I was kind of coaching people on the side. People were saying, you just keep becoming more and more successful. What are you doing? And I would say, well, what's your problem? And they would tell me what the problem was, and I would give them some advice. And the ones that took the advice would fix it, and they would start, having completely different results. So then I went into the industry. I started in 99, that's 24 years ago.
So that's a big change, like in 30 days to triple your income. Like, what did you see start happening other than the income? Like you mentioned opportunities. So by changing your attitude and changing those three things, so loving what you do, doing it the best of your ability, and treating people with respect, did that just bring more opportunities your way that you could say yes to? Is that what was happening, you found?
It wasn't that it brought an opportunity. It allowed me to see one that was there for 2 years that I didn't recognize as an opportunity. Because I was extremely judgmental, constantly making fun of people. I was just being a jerk. I mean, I was really being a jerk. And there was a guy that came into our place of employment twice a week. His job was to fuel the trucks and the trailers where I worked, right? So we have refrigerator trailers because they were, food in them. So he had to fuel those. We had a little over about 150 trucks. And the tractors. So my job was to make sure that he fueled the right ones when he would come in, because I would have the manifest of what was being loaded, what was loaded during the day, what's going out, that type of thing. His name was Drew Batty. He lived in Whiting, Indiana. And I would talk to him. Talked to him for 2 years. And I just made fun of him because he always smelled like diesel fuel. It doesn't matter what the weather was, he was out in it. At least I was under a roof. That's how small I was thinking about what I was doing. And one day he said, right after I made this change, he says to me, he goes, "You got to get out of here." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't know what to do." He said, why don't you come apply by us?" And I just immediately went into jerk mode. And I started teasing him. I'm like, "You drive a bomb, you're out there in the weather, you stink, to high heaven constantly. I said, and then I said to him something like, "Besides that, how much could you possibly be making doing that job?" And he said, "Well, last year I made 50,000. And I said, "No, you didn't. You're BSing me. There's no way." He said, "Well, I'm coming in Tuesday. I'll bring you my check stub and I'll show you." I said, "Okay, you do that." I said, "Because I don't believe you at all." And he came in, and for sure enough, he did. And I started rethinking what I was observing. Like, what is this that's in front of me? And it scared me because I had to deal with my own fears. I had a huge fear of driving a truck that had gasoline and diesel fuel in it. Like, what if it tips over? What if it blows up? I was very uneducated about it and very opinionated from an ignorant standpoint. And I had a lot of growing up and maturing to do. But I made a right decision in that moment, and I went to work for that company, and everything changed. I started off as a truck driver. 7 years later, I was expanding the company across the country.
Wow. So, and then you obviously dove right in. Like, that was kind of within 30 days. And like you said, within the 7 years, you were doing a lot of personal development. So you're going to courses. You started off with the Tony Robbins tapes. Did you start going to a lot of his programs too? Anything else?
I did. I did a bunch of Tony stuff in the first couple of years. And then in 1996, I was introduced to Bob Proctor. And I really resonated with Proctor because he talked about the spiritual aspect of success, and Tony never did, right? And he does a little bit these days, but he really doesn't make you understand how it actually works. And I had some conflicts because I was raised Catholic, and I started understanding how the world worked in I was born in 66. So around 1970, I was familiar with the Vietnam War. I was familiar with the assassinations. I was familiar with all the turmoil that we were going through. My dad had just come back from Nam. And I'm getting a religious education like a lot of people did. And I'm hearing that we come from this loving God, but I'm seeing that the world looks like it's falling apart. And I was like, how does that work? What is this? What's true? What's not true? And as a kid, I couldn't get anybody to teach me. So, a matter of fact, not only could I not get that, when I would go to my catechism classes every week, if I asked a question that was outside of what they were teaching, I would get disciplined. You really weren't allowed to go beyond what they were teaching you. And I was asking really good questions. I didn't know that at the time, but, I was kind of labeled as, being a disturber in the classroom. And I wasn't. I honestly really wanted to know the answers to this. So when I started working with Proctor, I started learning a lot about that side of it and mindset and success and the whole thing. And he was my mentor for 7 years. And we owned a company together. We went around the world speaking and teaching seminars together. It was a hell of an education, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's interesting that you brought up the spiritual side and that you were raised Catholic. The Bible has been something I've been diving into recently, which is new to me. So I have all sorts of questions as well that I've been bringing up, but I haven't been like, I don't think I've offended anybody yet, but not that that would be I would be too concerned about that. If I'm like you, I'm genuinely interested. Okay, if this is happening in the Bible, just help me understand this, right? And I've been able to find some great teachers. And I think this is another thing, kind of going back to studying and always wanting to learn, is I'm learning a ton, because in studying that, you can really make connections on what's happening in the world today, I find, and how it's starting to make a lot more sense to me.
Good.
It's actually, it has me more excited as things happen. I never like seeing terrible things happen, but when you start to understand them and when you're comparing it to the Bible, it does bring a lot of things into perspective. And it does really change the way that you act and how you perceive things.
It does. It absolutely does. And I think mostly people want to do the right thing, but I think they're very confused on what the right thing is. We live in a world of just tremendous contradictions, so yeah.
That's exactly what it is. And I think when I started reading it, I was talking to a friend and I said, you know what? I always said that there wasn't I always thought that there wasn't a guide for how to live, but there is. It's right there. It's called the Bible, right? Yeah. So, and I had no idea because I wasn't brought up with that.
Right? Yeah. And the other thing about the Bible and actually, and basically any of the 7 major religion texts that are out there, it really has a lot to do with who's teaching it to you. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ways to teach that stuff. And if you teach it the wrong way, it doesn't open people up. It doesn't set you free. It locks you down. So I found that along my journey also. Yeah,
absolutely. So this is fantastic. And I think this is all super important because, I mentioned leadership and mindset at the beginning. And right now, as all the things that are happening in the world, it's so important for business owners to be in a good mindset and to step up and be the leader that they need to be for their team. So what type of businesses are you working with, or people are you working with? And what are some of the common challenges that they're facing these days?
Well, man, over the years, we've worked with every kind of business you could possibly imagine, all the way up through celebrities, the whole thing. Currently, we're working with a lot of attorneys. We're working with some contractors. We've got a few doctors. Trying to think what other businesses we have. There's some product-based businesses that we're working with. It's all small business. Every once in a while, we get a big company or something, but that's not really our forte. So the biggest problem that people are having right now, well, there's a couple things. One is the argument of whether or not we're in a recession, but the inflation that's going on, the difficulty that people have got in their head about hiring quality people and finding them, right? It's like this belief came out that you can't find good people, and it's absolute nonsense. But what has happened is the change in the way that you get good people. See, one of the interesting things that happened during COVID is that a lot of people that were employed realized that they weren't going to die if they lost their employment. And when that unconscious fear, that superstition kind of was removed from them, they were like, I don't have to do a job I don't like anymore for pay that's inadequate. So the good ones can really kind of name their price. And what we've noticed is that there's a lot of people who struggle with paying for premium talent in whatever company that they have. And they think to themselves, well, I can't afford this. And the truth is they can't not afford it. Like if you get really great people and you're willing to pay for it, you've got something phenomenal on your hands. Subpar people, or what we call B players, cause nothing but problems in a company. We're always looking for A players, and we're willing to pay whatever the market bears on it. It doesn't matter to us. We don't make decisions based on how much something costs. And that's a big issue with a lot of people. They have it really burnt into their minds that their industry is highly competitive and that they can't pay and they can't ask for higher, charge more, for certain jobs that they do. So we kind of rearrange their mindset around those things a lot and show them actually how to do it. And we're usually able to increase their income and their productivity within the company really quick.
I guess that comes down to beliefs, right? So you're helping people change their beliefs, and beliefs are so powerful, and we often don't realize
Yeah.
what our beliefs are until somebody challenges them.
Yeah. Fundamentally, it is a belief change, no question. Paradigms.
So yeah, that's great. We actually have a hiring process that we've done. We've been on hiring spree lately, and we've been finding some great people. I can't say it's, well, you know what? I guess it all depends on how you define quick. It's been fairly quick. But we always go through what we call the rule of three. I think I read this or a version of it originally in the Entrepreneur Roller Coaster, I believe was a book. But in either case, it was we interview at least 3 people for, if it's a new position, right? If it's a position that we're not always going through 3 people every time. If it's an existing position, like carpenters, we have a lot of carpenters, right? But we interview at least 3 people for the position. They get interviewed 3 times by 3 different people, and we check at least 3 references. And that has done really well for us. The only thing that we can't really check is how well are they actually at the position that we put them in, right? You can't test their carpentry abilities during the interview process, right?
Yeah.
So that's the part that doesn't always work out. But do you have any other tips that you work with, or tools that work well for your students?
You mean as far as actually hiring them?
Yeah, and hiring them and finding the right people. Because you mentioned, it's the way you might go about hiring them now, or where you find them.
Yeah. So one of the things, so the person that is the CEO of my company, she's the one that's in charge of all of that. But one of the things that she really believes in is building relationships to hire, right? So she has relationships with different kinds of headhunters and people that are in the industry that are always kind of looking and moving and searching for talent. Because one of the things that can be very important to know is that a lot of time, if you're looking for an A player, you're not going to find them at home sitting on the couch. They're usually working for someone else. And the question is whether or not they're looking to increase their game or not. So that's one of the things. And you mentioned like time frame. I think that has to do with where you live, obviously, right? Are you live in an area that draws talent to that area, or do you live in an area that doesn't? Obviously, with most contractors, although some office help can be done remotely, but you'll need people that are local. So if you can bridge anything that can be done remotely, that's always a good thing if you're having trouble finding talent. But it's like anything else. We really believe in developing relationships with people over time so that you can source that, because there's a legitimacy to who you know as far as getting help with whatever it is that you need from a resource perspective in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually found that we do a lot on YouTube, a lot on social media, and we found that actually helps us in the hiring process too, because people know us and they want to work for us. So kind of by default, you're marketing to, educational marketing is kind of what we're putting out there, but that's also getting other people interested in working for us. So we've had people say, "Oh, I forgot you're in Ottawa," and he had moved back to Ottawa. So then he ended up coming in and working for us.
Is that from an ads perspective on YouTube?
Nope.
Videos.
Just by putting out regular content and people following us, it's actually people, it kind of, I guess, markets to people when you start to hire. So we,
Gotcha.
put it out, we put out a video and say, "Hey, by the way, we're actually hiring if you're in the Ottawa area," if it is for a carpenter, for example.
Okay.
But what I found is that when people find it, it actually kind of sells the company to them, because they might be working with 3 or 4 other offers as well. Right.
Sure.
And if they do research, then they might say, "Okay, well, this company looks like it's a lot better fit for what I'm looking for than the other company, even if maybe we're not paying as much," for example.
Yes.
Because money is important. They can name whatever price. But I also find that the really good people aren't just chasing the money. They're looking for something that's actually going to fit with their values.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what we're looking for.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. One of the things that we've done over the years is we kind of took a page out of Netflix's book. And Gary V, I don't know if you're familiar with Gary V or not, but he's a friend of mine. And one of the things, well, he really started teaching me this first. And the idea was, when you're working, when you're hiring people, or you're building the team within the office, give them the ability to live their life, right? So if they need to come in early or leave early, or they have to take so many days off or whatever, as long as they're getting their work done, don't be such a stickler. Like we don't say you only have a week's vacation and then in 2 years you get another week. You take as much vacation as you want, as long as your work's done and you're not doing it at a time where we need you on site for something. And that, at first that was scary, because that's not how I lived in the corporate world when a long time ago, but it made a lot of sense to me. And we definitely tried it. And it was an amazing thing, because we've never had anybody take advantage of it. And it works really well. It gives people the freedom to live their life and do the things that they need to do. If they got to take a doctor's appointment, no, they don't get any hassle because they came in 2 hours past whenever their normal starting time was. They can come in when they want, they can leave when they want, and they all do absolutely fantastic with getting their work done.
Yeah. Yeah. We're similar in the sense, if you're not on site. For us, it's a little bit trickier, because if you're working on a crew, it's like, well, you got to be there when the crew's there. Doctor's appointment or something happens, that's a different story, right? But for the most part, it's like we need people to be on time, or on a site at a specific time. But for the people who are working remotely in front of a computer, then I'm the same way. I agree. As long as the work gets done, I don't care if you start at 7 or if you start at 11, right? Just work gets done, and then great, fantastic. That's all we're looking for.
Right.
I love that. Now, how would you define like leadership within a business?
Leadership is an interesting thing, because our philosophy on it is that the leader's actually working for the employees, right? I'm the owner and the president, and Steph Tuss is my CEO. She actually runs the organization. And basically, we work for the people that do the work for us, right? We provide what it is that what they need from a content perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a video perspective, whatever it is that we're actually doing. So we have a transparency with us that works extremely well. And the idea is basically that they set their own goals based on what needs to be done, right? So now you got to remember, we have eight players. So it's not where we can sit there and go, well, that goal isn't big enough, or what you're promising to do isn't enough. They're always superseding what they can do. They want to actually grow. So there's what's the word for it that I'm thinking of? It's a great environment to work in with these individuals, because they come to us with problems. They come to us with solutions to the problems. So it's a leadership of transparency first. It's a leadership of authenticity first. We sunshine our mistakes. So if we make a mistake, we're the first one to admit it to the team that we made a mistake, and why we made the mistake, and how we're actually going to fix it, which then also gives them permission to feel free to do it. We don't beat people up over their mistakes. We encourage them to make mistakes. We know that there's no growth without those mistakes. Of course, that depends, like I would imagine if you're a carpenter, that can't be something that can happen on a regular basis. But when you're in a creative aspect of a company, it can happen quite a bit without, there's not a ramification to that. So that's pretty much how we lead from that perspective. It's transparency. We also get together 4 times a year. Okay. And in the 4 times a year, what we're doing is we're setting objectives for the next quarter or whatever it is. And we're on top of those objectives on a weekly basis. So we talk about them. We have a meeting every Monday morning. They talk about what the objectives are for the week, what they're doing, what they need help with. And this way, those things don't get out of hand. Like if there's anything that's going to go wrong, we know about it right away, and we're on top of it, so that the customer is always serviced properly.
Right. And when you say we meet, is that like your management team, or is that your entire?
Yeah. Okay. The management team. So they like I said, they work really close. They work really close together. So every head of each department works with Steph on an individual basis throughout the week based on whatever it is that needs to be done.
Right. Now, that's interesting. It's not too often where you see like someone like yourself, you started the business, but you now have a CEO that's running the business. At what point did you bring Steph in, and what was the reason for that?
About 4 years ago. Was it 4 years ago, 5 years ago? But yeah, she's been with me for 15 years too, on top of it. So here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing about the industry that I'm in. I haven't really seen anybody in this industry do a brand change where they didn't have to be up front in front of the business. So think about Tony Robbins, right? So Tony's in his 60s now. He's starting to have health issues. And he still can't get away from being the front end of that company. And I watched my mentor do that. I mean, he died at 86 and he was still doing live events. And I know he didn't want to. He didn't want to do any more live events when I worked with him, but he couldn't figure out how to change the brand to the process of what he did versus it actually being him, like a celebrity kind of a mindset. You know, I got to have this guy instead of what it is the person's actually teaching. So over time, as I thought about it, and Steph and I worked on it for a long time from an idea of what could we actually do with this, we realized that the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create an environment where it's about the message and not about me. In order to do that, we had to rebrand the company entirely. So it used to be like David Neagle Seminars, even though the legal name of the company is Life Is Now, but we got rid of the David Neagle Seminars type idea or David Neagle coaching, and it's just Life Is Now at this point. And we're building products and development around the idea of that I'm not going to be the person that does this for the rest of my life, being out there front doing events. I currently love it. I don't want to get to the place where I don't, and I can't. You know, I can't turn that around. So I'm so busy, I can't do two things. I can't run this company efficiently and also do the coaching and the speaking and all of those things effectively at the same time. And I'm a creative person. I like to work in various other things that I'm interested in. So Steph and I talked, and I actually had somebody before her that I didn't like the job that they did. So we let that person go, but Steph stepped in there and she said that she wanted to do it. We partnered up on the idea, and she's self-taught. I mean, she really went out there and learned how to be a CEO effectively. So I didn't have to change somebody's mindset around it. She had been around this company for a long time, and it was just a fantastic fit. And it works now because she can take care of all of the business stuff, and it frees me up to do everything else. So I don't have to be concerned with that on a daily basis.
Now, are you also kind of bringing like your coaching companies? I don't know how you define it, but essentially you're a coaching company.
Yeah, coaching consulting. Yeah.
Yeah. So coaching and consulting. Now, do you have coaches and consultants for your management too? That helps with all that, because we can't see the trees.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you work that into your business?
Well, so like Steph is part of extremely significant mastermind groups where she learns a lot of different things about running. I mean, she's working with people in mastermind groups that are, you know, $40-50 million, somewhere close to $100 million companies. And so she's learning a lot in that direction. Whatever our people need as far as further education, we help them find it or get into it. Usually they'll bring something to us. They'll be like, hey, we found this mastermind group or this course or whatever. They're all consistently learning. We all are.
And then you're covering that as the company, or does that?
No, we cover it.
That's fantastic.
We cover it 100%.
And I think, so yeah, we're starting to do a lot more training, bring people in for training as well. And for us, where I see my mind, just sharing my own experience, is my mind struggling a little bit, is like, all right, we should do this. I know it's important, but it's never a good time because of all the work that we have to send your crew or whoever to go do this coaching, right? Yeah. So it's like an internal struggle.
Well, one of the things that I did, and this started actually right before COVID, and it's changed a bit, but I started a second company called Neagle Media, and I had a vision for where that company was going, and then COVID hit. So I had already hired people to start working in that company. And then when COVID hit, what happened was it caused us to pivot and turn everything in-house, because for 20 years, I had been speaking live. I just go travel around the world constantly speaking. And so that got stopped, and we ended up doing it through Zoom. And unfortunately, we have a lot of office space. So we've got a huge space. It's probably about, I don't know, 4,000 square feet. We turned it into a studio so that we could do huge live events through Zoom within that space. But now what it's allowed us to do is that instead of having to farm out that end of the business, which we did for years, it's in-house. So that has saved us a ton of money right there. And these guys really know what they're doing. The media arm of the company knows really well what they're doing, right? They're great storytellers. They're great editors. They're great production shooters. They also are the ones that run my podcast. We built a podcast studio. We started the podcast about 7 years ago. We built a podcast studio about 5 years ago, I think. But it has worked out, and I just can't tell you how great it's worked out to actually do that.
That's fantastic. And like the media, so are you doing mostly online stuff now? Or are you still going out and traveling as well? Because people, I find, are traveling a lot more now.
We're starting to go back out and travel again.
Okay.
That has just started picking up this year, but still a lot online. Like a lot of people still want to bring me in online. I'm doing 2 or 3 interviews like this every week. And some of them are to relatively large groups of individuals. So I don't mind, because that saves travel cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think where I'm going is because we have our academy side too, where we're building up and we want to educate more contractors. And that's one of the reasons why we do what we do. And in my mind, I'm playing around like, all right, how do they like to learn? Right. Because most contractors got into it, like myself. I'm like, I don't like sitting in a class, right? And I got to go swing a hammer instead and make some money and learn and just learn while I'm doing. So I've been bouncing around some ideas. So I'm just trying to get a feel for what people are doing, if they want to get out and travel, and can they get away? It's always interesting, because contractors notoriously just too busy for that. They just want to work and get it done, and don't take too much time to work on themselves or on the business a lot of the times. Right.
Well, the great thing about the technology is that it allows a lot of people to do it in so-called off hours. I get they can't. That's tough when you got to travel like that. But if you can watch videos at, in the evening or on the weekends or something for a couple hours and educate yourself, that's a really great thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, I want to go back to leadership. You talked about the people that you're looking for. So are there specific qualities in people when you're hiring or when you're looking for those A players? What qualities are you looking for?
So Steph says, let me see if I can remember what she says here. Hungry, humble, and smart. I think that's what it is. Hungry, humble, and smart. Those are the 3 qualities of an A player. Are they hungry, humble, and smart? And generally, the way Steph hires people is she gives them a project, right? So depending on what we're hiring for, she gives them a project, she has them do the project, and then she determines really how well they are fitted for that position based on how well they do at the project.
And what kind of project? So is this before they're hired? They're like, here's some work, go do it, or is it?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what it is that we're hiring them for. Like in the video realm, she would give them a video project to go complete. Give me a 1-minute video on this topic or whatever, and then they would send it in, and it was phenomenal in the stuff that we actually got, because you could tell the quality of what they had the ability to do.
Interesting. That's a good way to do it for sure.
Yeah.
I like that idea. All right. So we talked about, just going through my notes here. Oh yeah. I want to touch on something that you have. So all this leadership talk. So you have the visionary leader assessment.
Yes.
Want to share? Can you share what that is and where we can go and take that assessment?
So this is something that we created, and it has turned out to be an unbelievable tool. One of the problems that we had in the consulting end of the business, the coaching end of the business, was helping the client determine what kind of leader they are. And what we found was that they had value conflicts based on how they were working. And the reason was because they didn't really understand what kind of a leader that they are. So Steph worked with some people and broke this down into categories. which helps them understand the way that they lead best, which then determines who they need to hire and what people they need in what positions to do so. So I'm like a visionary leader. I am not good on sitting down and coming up with checklists and, you know, like all that kind of stuff. But when you take this assessment, and it doesn't take long to take it, it gives you an idea of what you're good at, what you love, and the way you're best suited to lead. So you're not in conflict with yourself anymore. A lot of people think to themselves, I don't really like doing this, but I have to do it. And then they procrastinate on it, or they don't do well. And they don't realize that they shouldn't be doing that, right? Whatever it is that it might be that they have to do, they need to hire somebody how to do that. She's got a great saying. She says, the answer to the question is who, not how, right? So we need to find out, who do we need to get to do that job? Not how do we have to figure out how to do all of those things. We're really big on teaching our clients, you need to stay in your lane and do what you love, and you need to hire really amazing people that do the other stuff.
And where can we go to do this assessment?
Oh, yeah, great. So let me tell you here. It is lifeisnowinc.com, VLA, Victor Lima Alpha -grow. It really gives a person a lot of clarity, and you'll see that people just have a complete relief when now they will have to grow in essence to the fact that they got to wrap their mind around hiring people to do things and get out of the idea that they need to do everything. We don't believe in that. We don't think businesses need to struggle and suffer and all of that. That one of the biggest problems is that they don't think that they could pay for it. And these are things that actually pay for themselves, but you have to really do it to see that.
Yeah. And that's, I guess that's part of you have to put the work in, right? And
You got to put the work in.
Yeah. Everybody, you know, it's easy to look at stuff and look at success and be like, oh, it'd be great to be there. But everything you see is like a fraction of a percent of what somebody actually did to get there.
That's right.
I think that's the biggest thing. And I have a 9-year-old too, and we're working with that, right? And everything they want is now, or if something, you just had a great day, for example, but then if one thing bad happens, it's like, well, what are we going to do with that, right? You can either focus on the one thing that you can't have now, or you can focus on the greatness that you had, or you can focus on the next thing that you're going to do that's going to be fun, right? And luckily we've been able to, you know, if something bad happens, now we've got a mindset, we create this habit where it's like, well, that just means something better is coming, right? That something better is coming.
Yeah,
right?
that's great. Yeah.
But that's a great way. I think having, I always say my son is my greatest teacher, because in having a son or having to teach stuff or seeing the habits that he picks up, it makes me look at myself and be like, all right, did he get that from me? Probably. What could I do to change that? Right. So been a great journey.
To add on to what you're saying here, one of the things that's so important for business owners to understand is that there's no way that they can achieve the success that they want without learning the principles of leverage. And we've got to get out of the mindset that we have to do it all, that we have to solve all the problems, that we have to be the smartest one in the group. If we can get out of that and understand how to leverage money, time, knowledge, and people, those are the 4 points of leverage. You can build an extraordinary organization with amazing people, and everybody's having a blast.
Now, how do you measure, or how do you leverage time?
So here's this idea. So to think about, let's bring Einstein into this here for a second. The whole concept of there's no time without space. So whenever we're using time as an idea, maybe we're scheduling something or whatever, at the same time, you're also creating a space. And here's where the problem comes into. When you create that space that goes along with the time, what are you filling it with? Right? You have to really think about that. What am I filling it with? So let's say I'm going to set a goal for myself for the week. Mm-hmm. Now I have got to fill that with something. What's my mindset around what am I filling it with? Am I filling it with hard work? You know, here's something that's interesting. I totally believe in hard work, but not from the principle which most people believe in it. And I had this problem myself. I didn't realize it. The idea is that it's so ingrained in our mind and attached to our identity that what most people do is they actually make things harder than they are, instead of understanding that you can make it easy, you can make it simple. So one of the first things that we do is tell people success is easy. Fill that time with making it easy and making it fun. And then you have a totally different experience within that time frame. Now, when you do that, you can bring in people to help leverage that time. You can bring in knowledge. You can bring in money or any resource, really, whatever is going to help you get more done in less time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it kind of comes back to the beliefs that we were talking about before. And that's actually, I realized in working with one of the mastermind groups that I'm in, is I had a belief, just like what you were saying about working hard, you got to work hard to make your money. And so I realized in doing that, I'm like, wow, that's a really shitty belief to have, right? If you want to be successful financially, and you're wondering why you're working so much all the time, it's all right, I got to change that belief. And I just came to this realization, I think it was about a month ago with this group. And I'm like, oh my God, a light bulb went off. Now I'm like, money flows to me easily and freely, right? I'm changing all these beliefs and reading it every day, and we'll figure it out. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to work hard, but it's the same sort of thing, right? It's
right.
Not that mindset. Now it changes it from having to work hard to just wanting to work and have fun.
Yeah.
Because everything else, because it's going to come easy. It doesn't really matter. Just trusting in the process and taking advantage of the opportunity. So. Well, David, this has been fantastic. You're obviously a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. So thank you for taking the time. I'm sure you have a lot of people pulling on your time. So
thank you for having me.
I'm glad you leveraged it to bring it here. So
absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
Any parting words of advice for our listeners? And after that, share the best place for people to go. I know we're going to share all the links that you had, but if there's anywhere in particular beyond the assessment, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. Yeah. I'll give you something that it's profound when you really think about it. How can I make this easy? Right. So for the contractors, for everybody in the business, the owners, all down the line, if you think to yourself, how can I make this easy, and keep that in the forefront of your mind, you'll realize that most of the problems that you run into are not only can you solve every problem, but you'll solve it much quicker and faster because you're changing your mind about how to view it. Let's view this easy versus difficult. A lot of people get into a problem and they go, oh my God, I can't believe I got this problem. Look at this. This is a disaster. Stop saying that, right? Say, this is nothing. This is a piece of cake. We got this. This is going to be easy. We'll fix it. And your mind will find a way to do it in an easy perspective. It really works.
Amazing. And where do people go if they want to get in touch with you?
Go to the Successful Mind podcast. Watch our podcast, because that'll let you know if what we have is right for you or not. It doesn't cost you a dime.
Great. Well, David, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks.